The Hell Let Loose map tier list has completely changed. With update 20 finally adding Juno Beach, we now have 20 maps in the pool. With the addition of Lake Balaton and Silo Heights on the way, the battlefield is only getting bigger. But here's the thing, I know for a fact that by the end of this video, at least half of you are going to think I've completely lost my mind. So before we start, head to the comments right now and tell me which map is the most overrated map in Hell Let Loose, and see if we agree. I guarantee you there are going to be some controversial picks, so let me know what you would change. This isn't just a list based off of one good game or one bad experience. Every map I'm judging on 5 categories: performance, replayability, infantry and tank balance, aesthetics, and finally, enjoyability. At the end of the day, when the loading screen appears, are we excited to play it? So let's get into it and rank every single Hell Let Loose map in June 2026. So I'm going to just go over quickly in alphabetical order, starting with Karantan, ending with Utah, and Juno I'm going to leave to the end, so just wait and see, as you may be surprised where I place it. But we're just going to go over a couple of things. I'm not going to make this video too long. So we will just kick things off today with Karantan, which will start off at putting in the A tier, probably towards the top of it. A really solid part of the 6 original French maps. I think it does a lot of the things right, the balancing of urban combat, open fields, and I just think it's a solid map. So going on to Driel, which I do think is probably the most underrated map currently in the game. People tend to forget more about it and more so compare it to Remagen, but every time it comes up, I have a great match. I really like the lanes of tanking, the engagement of infantry. Would be a serious contender for A tier, but I do think underrated. I think it belongs solidly in B plus tier. Then El Alamein, which is the main player-based divider, the Marmite of Hell Let Loose. For me, El Alamein sits a little bit lower on the tier list than other people would place it. I think that the gameplay, tankers love the gameplay. I think it's high up there in terms of it being a great tank map. For me, the letdown is the infantry side. Having to navigate those massive hills with MGs, AT staring you down is never a fun experience. And so El Alamein, in my eyes, definitely a D-tier map. Elsenborn Ridge, for me, one of the best looking maps in the game outside of when there are weather. I think that outside of how it looks, that matches do feel slow, drawn out. Sightlines are enormous, and crossing the middle of the map does just feel horrible as infantry. And so for that reason, it does also sit in the D tier for me. I think below El Alamein definitely, so the bottom half of D tier. Foy is probably the most iconic map in Hell Let Loose. Incredible sightlines, some of the best armor gameplay in the game, but it does lose some points because infantry can feel completely exposed. It is impossible just to ignore how memorable and unique Foy is. There's no other map like it. Right now I'm going to place it at the bottom of A tier. Below Karantan. I just feel like it has that uniqueness. You know, there are some areas that infantry does feel like it gets caught out, but less so than El Alamein. Probably arguably the strongest tank map that there is in the game. Hill 400s, for me, Hill 400 sits near the bottom of the list. I am going to put it in F tier for now. I think that out of the forest maps, it's probably the second worst forest map that there is. Visibility is really poor, armor gameplay is heavily restricted, and it just feels like sometimes you're running uphill against a brick wall, and that repetitiveness I just don't enjoy. It feels like a grind for positioning rather than a tactical gameplay loop and mechanic. And you know, just being able to mine off armor so that it can't get through and you can't get flanks going on. I'm definitely putting it in F tier. The second out of the forest maps is going to be Hergen Forest. So Hergen is an improvement for me over Hill 400. Definitely matches that are more enjoyable. You know, visibility does remain a big issue as it does with all of the forest maps, but I think that the tank gameplay is slightly better. It revolves more around being in the sight lines, especially over Hill 15 Overlook. And like I said, it is slightly better than Hill 400. It does see a little bit more comp gameplay. So for me, I'm actually going to stick it at the bottom of the C tier list for now. Kharkov is another map I think gets underrated. It does perform well. It looks pretty nice. and does have that extra balance of infantry outside of certain lanes like left side. Most of the complaints I hear aren't about performance, but about the sightlines or the strong points, which are difficult. So I do want to place Kharkov again in C tier. I think just below Hergen Forest in C tier is probably where it sits. You know, I don't mind seeing it occasionally. The same with Hergen Forest. And we'll move on to Kursk. So Kursk is cursed. A lot of players really despise this map, but I think that the tank balance is arguably better than it is on El Alamein. And I do feel like the trench warfare is slightly more open to infantry pushes than it is also on El Alamein. The main comparison happening there because it is one of the main tanking maps. I do feel like it is the map that needs the most love, the most probably revisit in terms of a rework at some point to try and narrow down the windmill sightlines, Oleg's house hill, and stuff like that. You know, and particularly from a German side, the Germans are heavily weighted to win the game if they get control of windmill, and for that reason, I cannot really place it above a C tier. But I am going to place it between Kharkov and Hergen Forest in that C tier. I do think I enjoy slightly more Kursk than Kharkov. And now Mortain. So Mortain for me, there's not much to say. Hands down, probably one of the least favorite maps in terms of the whole Hell Let Loose population. It is going to sit at the very bottom of the F tier. Just misery. Attacking those hills, attacking the hedgerows, getting tanks instantly satchelled from a bush wookie. It's just going to sit at the bottom of F tier. I don't think we need to talk more about that. Omaha coming up next. One of the most iconic maps and nostalgic experiences for me. I remember first loading up Hell Let Loose a couple of years ago and jumping straight into offensive game mode, US sides. I think few maps create real moments like Omaha does, and the immersion is incredible. Whilst it's not the most balanced map, it's definitely one of the most memorable, and I am going to stick it into the A tier because of that. I'm going to stick it between Boy and Omaha, so it goes right there. PHL. So PHL for me, after the refresh, it's definitely improved. Additional river crossings, making movement for infantry better. I do feel like it's a very strong tank map, not as strong as Foyer's, but I think it suffers from the same problem that it always does, which is that it's very lane based. You have one hedgerow that's dense, surrounded by a lot of open fields, and flanking is really limited. From a gameplay perspective, most of the time I find it more frustrating than enjoyable. You know, it is better than it used to be, but it's not enough to push it into the higher like A or S tiers, and it is for me going to sit in B tier. Remagen now. So Remagen for me is one of the more unique maps. The bridge rework definitely helped, but it has still issues with Urple Hill. You know, it does feel like sometimes that you're loading into an hour-long bridge simulator, especially with SPAs, machine guns, farming. You know, even though you have two wide lanes to open up crossing the bridge, I do feel like that has helped move it out of the lower, you know, F or D tiers. I still feel like it has room for improvement in areas that I just don't think are ever going to be seen just because of the layout of the map. But I am going to place Remagen at top of C tier, whereas previously it probably would have been D tier, possibly F tier. But now coming on to SME, or Saint-Mihiel Église, comfortably the first S tier for me. Sees a lot of play in comp, a lot of play and rotation in public game. You know, the town creates some really nice and interesting infantry battles. The open fields around give armor and flanking squads the opportunity. I think it's one of the most played maps. I think that the balance is really excellent. The strong points are all really good, and it constantly just produces that replayability and high quality match that you're looking for. And now we're going to go to SMDM in the same situation. I don't think there's any question. I am going to place SMDM at the very top of the S tier list. It's one of the strongest public competitive maps in Hell Let Loose. I think that all the points are pretty flawless. I think that the fighting is pretty flawless. The performance is there. It's one of the most played maps in rotation, and it's apparent as to why. I just feel like it is the creme de la creme. I think it's what everyone is looking for when they are playing and loading into Hell Let Loose. Moving on, Smolensk does feel like what Stalingrad should have been years ago. You got a mix of urban fighting, open grounds, you know, CQC. The city fighting can get intense. My biggest complaint is the performance around the center of the map, and hopefully they can address that in a hotfix. It does feel a little bit rough around the edges, but it's definitely a great addition. And I am going to sit Smolensk at the bottom of B tier. I do feel like it's earned its spot, and it's a great map. I do enjoy my time on there whenever it comes out. So Stalingrad coming up is an interesting one. Come a long way since its release. The refresh has fixed a lot of issues, especially the crashing and the major FPS drops. There have been some new tank routes, some new line of sight that have been opened. The German hill at the bottom of the map, a little less so intrusive. It's not by any means perfect, but I do feel like it is a strong contender. Definitely up there with Smolensk, with Purple Heart. I feel like it is a little bit of a drop down of the top 5 maps that we currently have. And so for that reason, I'm putting it just below Triel in the B tier. It's going to sit solidly in the B tier for now. We got Tobruk, Utah, and Juno Beach left. So for Tobruk, I think it's one of the biggest disappointments in maps outside of Mortain. I still can't go over the fact that the sticks and the trees look like German grenades. You know, it's got some decent ideas, but the visibility makes stuff miserable, and it does just feel rough. Tanking feels subpar. You know, the lines for infantry aren't that great, and middle points do feel very skewed. So I am going to add it to the bottom of the F tier. I think it's going to actually sit above Hill 400 for me, or maybe below Hill 400 actually. I think I'm going to place it below Hill 400. I know some people might not agree. Let me know if you agree with that, but I do feel like Hill 400 is slightly better than Tobruk is. Maybe I'm just being a little bit harsh. But Utah now. So Utah for me is sitting again at the top of the tier list. We go from the bottom to the top. I think it is a solid S tier. It does almost everything as well as SMDM. Strong points are excellent and very varied. The flow is great. There's a great balance between armor and infantry. Works well in public games and comp games. There's very few like sectors that actually make me groan and not want to play the map. I always feel like Utah is like one of the maps where individually I can have a bigger impact on the game. And obviously replayability, like it's an insanely replayed map, and for good reason. A lot of people love this, and for this reason I am going to stick it in between SMDM and SME as my second favorite map. Finally, we come to Juno Beach. I think I've played Juno around 20-25 full matches already. And it's probably the best map to come out in recent years. There's a really good level of variation across the map, good tanking and infantry lanes, but there's still that imbalance in midpoint fighting. You know, the US have to cross so many bridges. The German side is very open left-hand side. Maybe some balancing changes, some hot fixes to address some FPS and performance issues, and then I could actually really place it higher up on the tier list than where I'm able to. For now, I think that it is a solid A tier. The question is where it goes in the A tier. I do feel like the uniqueness of the map is a little bit flawed because it's been cross-stitched with other textures and buildings and structures other than being built from the ground up. But I do find myself wanting to play more and more of it every time it comes up. So for me, Juno Beach, for now, will sit below Foy at the bottom of the A tier list. And there you have it. That is my completed June 2026 list and the reasons behind why I've placed the maps where they're placed. Let me know if you agree or not agree. And if you haven't yet, slap that sub button. It really helps me with the algorithm and to produce more content for you guys. Till next time. Ta.